Well, Hillary Clinton, who failed to hit the reset button with Russia under the Obama administration, well, she has a history, as you know, of accusing political opponents of being connected to the Kremlin. Remember back in 2019 when crooked Hillary tried to destroy fellow Democrat Tulsi Gabbard and accused her of being a Russian asset.
Russians, they have a bunch of sites and bots and other ways of supporting her so far. And that's assuming Jill Stein will give it up, which she might not, because she's also a Russian asset.
She didn't say Tulsi Gabbard's name there, but it was later confirmed that that's exactly who she was talking about. But it seems that the only one using Russia to take down American politicians is Hillary. Durham's indictment of Michael Sussman exposes what we've known all along. The Trump-Russia collusion narrative was a pure hoax perpetrated by the Clinton campaign via Fusion GPS and the phony Steele dossier. Now, doesn't that make Hillary Clinton an asset of the Kremlin instead? Joining us now is former presidential candidate and Representative Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi, thanks so much for being here. I'm sure you remember better than anyone else when you were accused by Hillary Clinton of being a Russian asset. Do any of these new revelations confirm what you already knew, or all along did you know they were making this up to smear political opponents?
Yeah, it confirms what I knew to be true, which is something bigger than what happened to me. It really points to the fact that we have a situation in our country where the powerful elite, people like Hillary Clinton and those around her, the deep state, the media, they're all colluding to destroy outsiders who they deem as posing a threat to their power. So essentially what they do is they create this dictatorship where those who are outsiders, those who put country first, those who are not afraid to challenge the establishment and those who don't toe the line, they do all they can to silence and censor and eliminate these outsiders that they deem pose a threat to their power. And this is what is so dangerous. This is much bigger than any individual. It's actually a threat to our democracy and to the American people. And their arrogance in believing that they have the right to do this and doing so without any regard for who gets hurt in the process or how it actually undermines our country, our democracy, and damages and hurts the interests of the American people. The American people deserve better than this. And the worst part, Pete, is they get away with it.
It's true. When you heard her say that you were a favorite of the Russians, did she present any evidence of that? And when the media examined it, were you given a fair court of public opinion, a fair opportunity to actually respond to that?
I'm smiling a little bit, Pete, because you and I both know the answer to that is no. And the answer to that is no, because from the very beginning, again, this happened to me. It also happened to Donald Trump. It just points to this is not about Democrats or Republicans. It's about their concerted and collective effort working together to destroy and silence those who challenge their power. And so, no, the media did not challenge or ask her for evidence. In the clip you played, there was no request for, hey, point out the proof to this pretty heinous allegation against a sitting member of Congress with highest levels of classifications, security clearances, also a soldier currently serving in the Army Reserves. I mean, you look at all of these things and you see how absolutely ludicrous it is, but it just points to the fact that they do so completely arrogantly and without hesitation. And really, here's the danger, is that as long as you have people in power who are willing to sacrifice the interests of our country to serve their own selfish interests, rather than putting themselves last and serving the best interest of the country, If we allow this to continue, then we, the American people, lose the country that we love.
Yeah, the worst thing is that they feel like they got away with it. They feel like it worked. They got their way. And now folks like Jake Sullivan, who was front and center in pushing the smear against Donald Trump, well, he's the national security advisor, making the rest of us wonder whether or not they'd be willing to do that to any one of us if they had the opportunity. Tulsi Gabbard, thanks for shooting straight. You always do, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page. Catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
Introduced articles of impeachment on President Joe Biden. The reason why I've done so is for his disgraceful actions having to do with Afghanistan, abandoning Americans, arming and terrorist nation, the Taliban, which is treason, giving aid and comfort to our enemies. But also, I've also introduced articles of impeachment for the national security crisis created at our southern border, which today is actually being invaded. But heading into this week, perhaps the most evil and disgusting thing that is going to happen in this 117th Congress is the bill that's going to be introduced that makes it a federal law to allow abortion up until the day of birth. This wall says, "In God we trust." And if that is the case, then this Congress will reject this evil bill and protect the innocent unborn. If this nation becomes a nation where we have such a federal law that can kill a baby up until the day of birth, then God will no longer provide protection in His grace over America. Thank you. I yield the remainder of my time.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president. For what
President Trump has filed a $100 million lawsuit against his own niece and 3 New York Times reporters. He says his niece, Mary Trump, conspired with the Times to get his tax returns for a Pulitzer Prize-winning story about his apparent losses and tax avoidance. The suit alleges the Times pushed Mary to smuggle records out of her attorney's office. Mary Trump admitted she released his taxes to the Times in a book she wrote about her uncle, and she responded to the lawsuit in a statement saying this: "It's desperation. The walls are closing in, and he's throwing anything against the wall that he thinks will stick." One of the Times reporters who is being sued, Suzanne Craig, also responding on Twitter, saying, quote, "I knocked on Mary Trump's door. She opened it. I think they call that journalism." Let's dig deeper and bring in MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savalas. Danny, this is what Donald Trump does. thousands and thousands of lawsuits, a massive number, 100 million. I feel like I'm watching a movie. Does he have any sort of leg to stand on here? Or is this just a way for him to get himself in the headlines? Because in the world of Trump, all press is good press. And here we are talking about him.
There may be a case against Mary Trump, and that's assuming that everything in the complaint is true, which is not necessarily known right now. And that would be that there was some prior litigation. The parties entered into an agreement because they got all this discovery and sensitive documents, and Mary Trump allegedly signed an agreement to never disclose these documents. And if she did, potentially, she could be in breach, as the complaint alleges. But as against the media defendants, the New York Times, Suzanne Craig, David Barstow, and Russell, you see all of them right there on the screen, the case is much weaker. And that's because when reporters engage in news gathering, in journalism, and they receive documents over the transom, as it were, that is probably protected First Amendment activity, even if they know that that person, their source, their confidential source, may be violating some agreement. After all, that's happened a million times in journalism.
Okay, but Danny, let's say he's got a case against Mary Trump. Where does the number 100 million come from? Austin Powers?
I was just about to say 100 million in the Austin Powers way. I don't know where you get that money from, but the challenge is with modern pleading is that there's every incentive to ask for the sun, the moon, and the stars, and then come off your ridiculous number as the case progresses. And sadly, for that reason, pleadings often feature a number that is plucked out of the ether, that is outrageously high, which is perfect for someone like Donald Trump to ask for that amount of money and then later on sell for really whatever you want to, because you're not bound by that initial number in your pleadings, at least in most jurisdictions.
A mounting humanitarian and political crisis. Shocking images show Border Patrol agents rounding up Haitian immigrants on horseback. These pictures went viral, prompting the White House to do further damage control on the migrant crisis at the Texas-Mexico border.
I think it's important for people to know this is not who we are. That's not who the Biden-Harris administration is. And we're going to absolutely pursue that investigation and get to the bottom of what happened here.
Meanwhile, deportation flights are ongoing. And I think what's confusing for people there is Secretary Mayorkas back in May said to Haitian nationals already here, we know things are so terrible in your country that you're going to get a temporary extension. We're not going to send you back. Your case is going to be ongoing. You're going to be here. Shouldn't that same idea apply now?
You're right. Temporary protected status, which is something the Secretary and the Secretary of State also put in place. They actually extended it further because of the turmoil on the ground into later in the summer. Now, anyone who is here before then may be eligible for temporary protected status, and we're looking into that. People may be eligible for that. But right now, we also have to implement our laws at the border. We also want to protect people, both in that community, but also migrants. One of the challenges, as we're all facing a pandemic here, is the gathering of so many people. We're still implementing Title 42, which means that we are going to send people out of the country who come in as we implement that.
What I saw depicted about those individuals on horseback treating human beings the way they were is horrible. And I fully support what is happening right now, which is a thorough investigation into exactly what is going on there. But human beings should never be treated that way, and I'm deeply troubled about it. The whole point is that we have to understand Haiti. I mean, talk about a country that has just experienced so much tragedy that has been about natural disasters, and we really have to do a lot more to recognize that as a member of the Western Hemisphere, to support some very basic needs that the people of Haiti have to get back up.
I don't think we could design a less coherent policy response than what we just heard from Jen Psaki and from Vice President Harris there. Here to discuss the crisis and the Biden administration's response is friend of the show, Brianna Joy Gray, host of the Bad Faith podcast and former National Press Secretary for the Sanders campaign. Welcome, Brianna.
Thank you.
So on the one hand, if you are a Haitian migrant who is already here in the country, you're going to be given temporary protected status because the country is too unstable to be sent back to. On the other hand, if you're in Del Rio, Texas, you're going to get put on a plane as rapidly as possible and sent back to that unstable situation. How do they come up with this incoherent strategy?
Well, I think what's really telling in this moment is that a lot of what American voters, what Democrats were sold as a shift from the Donald Trump era, an era which was roundly painted as unconscionable, especially with respect to his immigration policy. You know, the dramatic shift that was anticipated is not quite as dramatic as people would like. Kamala Harris, who's been put in charge of border issues, put her foot into it earlier this year when she gave a speech in a visit to Central America where she said, do not come, right? In stark contrast to the kind of messaging she was putting out while she was still running for president and over the course of last summer when she was a vice presidential candidate and then nominee. And what we're seeing now is, frankly, an implementation of laws put into effect by Donald Trump. When Jen Psaki says we have to implement the laws in the books and references Title 42, she's talking about a Trump-era law that allowed for the quick deportation of people for COVID reasons, because the justification being that the process should be expedited because of the risk that the virus hold. And having this be the case at the same time that the Democrats still attempt to posture as being especially humane in these respects, I think is a real wake-up call moment for a lot of folks who really thought they were getting a more meaningful policy shift from the days of Donald Trump.
And what was remarkable
On this vote, the yeas are 220 and the nays are 211, with 0 answering present. The bill is passed.
Plan. We're executing on our plan, and we will continue to do so.
But you just testified that it's working. I'm just trying to understand. Is this success? Are you telling me that this is successful? Your plan is successful currently?
Senator.
We learned, Maggie, that the Biden administration, obviously, overnight, is having another issue that kind of contributes to the domestic agenda hits that he's been taking. Senate Democrats, they're not going to be able to include a pathway to legalization for millions of immigrants in their $3.5 trillion bill after some new guidance from the Senate parliamentarian. Where does this put them?
So they're going to attempt to try to revisit this, Brianna. There are going to be, there's, I think, 4 different efforts that pro-immigration reform advocates have been making in terms of the Senate parliamentarian. They are going to come back at this. The White House made clear they're going to come back at this on other pieces, but certainly it is a hit. And it is also just a reminder that this White House is playing this sort of triangulation move of, we're not going to have Congress, we're not going to push Congress to pass legislation. We are going to try other maneuvers because the majority is so slim and because there are so many members who might not go along with this. It avoids putting pressure on them. But at the end of the day, a key piece of immigration reform still doesn't get done. It's a blow any way you look at it, even for the people who say they were expecting it.
Yeah, this is key, John, to President Biden's agenda. He wants to move this thing along. And here you see that roadblocks are coming up against it.
They absolutely are. I think it shows the limits to larding up what you can pass in reconciliation. I don't think folks should get over themselves and say, the Biden agenda is doomed. But there are some serious hurdles, and this dream has a deadline on it. And the Biden administration needs to be totally focused on passing this. You can't make the perfect enemy the good. I think they know that. They need to start acting that way.
Yeah, it's like, where is the finish line in this race?
So is there a plan to get this done?
Well, look, Jim, I think that this is a critical week, John, and I think one of the things to keep in mind up here on Capitol Hill is that Democrats are going to come back into town today. They're going to have some meetings together, and hopefully, at least from Democratic leaders' perspective, they're going to be able to find a path forward. But there are really 2 moving parts here. The first piece of this is that infrastructure bill that the Senate already passed, and we are still waiting for the House of Representatives to pass. The deadline for that, given by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, is September 27th. That is a key date that she agreed with moderates would be the time that she would bring that bill to the floor. But meanwhile, progressives are arguing that they are not going to vote for that proposal unless the larger economic package, that $3.5 trillion package, is actually finished and ready for a vote as well. They are worried about that more moderate bill, that infrastructure bill, going first. And so that's really what Democrats are struggling with right now. How do you move this forward when you have moderates in the Senate like Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, who have argued behind closed doors and publicly that $3.5 trillion is too high of a price tag? And that's before you get into big differences over tax policy, over what's included in the bill. Those are still issues that need to be worked out. And right now, with just a couple of days until that September 27th deadline, it's not clear that's going to be figured out, John.
Arlette, obviously immigration reform is something that this White House and Democrats wanted in there. I'm not sure everyone was expecting it to get through reconciliation, but still just another huge speed bump or thing that has blown up to an extent in the Biden administration's face. Is there a new strategy that they have to get all this through?
Well, John, the White House is aware they're entering another critical stretch when it comes to this massive economic proposal. And White House advisors say that they're really going to lean into and dive and dial up their case when it comes to talking about help for the middle class. Their arguments is that this should be viewed through the lens that this plan would help the middle class over the wealthy and corporations, along with lowering costs when it comes to prescription drugs, the cost of education, elderly care as well.
Let's go.
What's up, guys? Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. Welcome to Facts, Truths, and Lessons. This is your Thirsty Thursday topics on Tommy Nation Politics. For more political updates, make sure you go to www.tommynationpolitics.com. Go to our website, subscribe, like, and share our videos. And also, don't forget, guys, that we can always contact you. You can contact me on facebook.com/Tommy Nation Politics. There's a lot of things going on in the news, as usual. Today, the Congress, the House of Representatives just passed their debt ceiling bill. They're not going to pay off the national deficit. They're going to once again raise the debt ceiling. Also in the Congress, 4 Republican senators stepped up for articles of impeachment for Joe Biden. I mean, is it warranted? At this point, does it really matter? Because every single time a party goes into office, the other party tries to impeach the president. This is a fight between the two parties. It's a big club. We're not in it, guys. And that's the fact. That's the truth, and that's the lesson. Just so you Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today? Tommy Nation Politics.
Subsequent vote going on as well. It's my intention to try to continue through the process, but I just want to make members aware. Senator Paul.
I've advocated for an end to the Afghan war for over a decade. I'm glad it's finally over. But never in my worst nightmares could I have imagined that an administration would leave $80 billion worth of weaponry to the Taliban. Dozens of planes and helicopters, thousands of armored carriers, hundreds of thousands of automatic weapons, and worst of all, 13 of our brave young men and women. Never in my worst nightmares did anyone or conceive of such a colossal incompetence. Abandoning Bagram Air Force Base will be remembered as one of the worst military decisions in our history. Holding no one accountable, having everyone circle the wagons and say, hey, we all agreed abandoning Bagram Air Force Base was a great idea. This is going to be remembered by the people. Holding no one accountable for letting the base go, it will be remembered. To add insult to injury, this week you've now released $64 million in aid to Afghanistan. Don't we have some prohibition against giving aid and comfort to the enemy? Now, the argument from the Biden administration is, oh, we're giving it to charities, and it's for the good of the people, for poor people, and for women. Well, the Taliban has a history of taking this. throughout their governance, they would take the money. This was a big complaint we had when they were in power the last time. They now have $80 billion worth of weapons, 350,000 automatic weapons. Are we really naive enough to believe that we're just going to keep sending charity to Afghanistan and they're not going to interrupt it? I think that's a foolish notion. The $64 million, though, is the tip of the iceberg. There's still about $10 billion out there that was designated for the Afghan government. Can you pledge today, without equivocation, that the Biden administration will not release any of this money to the Taliban?
Absent the Taliban making good on the commitments and expectations of the international community that I've outlined previously, that's correct.
Maybe we could deduct a fee for the weapons they took.
So, Senator, on the weapons, again, I'll defer to my colleagues at the Pentagon who are more expert in this. You're right that about $80 billion worth of weaponry has been provided over the course of the last 15 or 16 years. Much of that, the significant weaponry, planes, helicopters, is actually inoperable, will soon become inoperable because it can't be maintained. In terms of the strategic threat that weaponry poses, it doesn't to us or to Afghanistan's neighbors.
But you can't say you're not going to give them the money. If they behave, you're going to give them the money. Why don't we subtract the $80 billion from the $10 billion you're going to give them? Then they're minus 70 still. I mean, really, the fact that you're entertaining good behavior, that they'll get more money, I think is a big mistake and a naive notion that we're going to somehow change this Stone Age philosophy by giving them more of our money. We've sunk trillions of dollars over this. This is our chance to have a peace dividend. Let's quit sending good money after bad. The guy the Biden administration droned, was he an aid worker or an ISIS-K operative?
The administration is, of course, reviewing that strike, and I'm sure that a full assessment will be forthcoming.
So you don't know if it was an aid worker or an ISIS-K operative?
The ass licker asked me, what is this? What the fuck is this, you weirdo? Well, ass licker, I know it's not any ass that you've seen, but this is Tommy Nation Politics. It's a free-thinking, innovative, and totally open-minded independent media. If I were Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, though, I'd say, So I'm glad I'm not him. Tommy Nation Politics. We got a lot in the news today to cover. And that's what the fuck is this. You can call me a weirdo, that's cool. It's really actually a badge because that means I'm not part of the norms or society. The part of the norms and parts of society, they vote for Democrats and Republicans. They consume and obey. So thank God. Ass Licker, thank you so much for your compliments. Thank you for watching Tommy Nation Politics. You can also donate to Tommy Nation Politics, guys. Capital T, capital N, capital P, Tommy Nation Politics, one word. Cash App, Venmo, or PayPal. We're free-thinking, innovative, and totally progressive new independent media, guys. So there you have it, guys, the overview. Truths, lessons, fallacies. You know, researchers from Harvard, Cornell, and dozens of other universities around the world are conducting an ongoing analysis to compare 18 nations' responses to the COVID-19 pandemic to determine whether or not what happened or what worked with them fell short. Scholars identified fallacies, including the notion that politics takes a backseat to policy in crisis. Right. That's what they noticed. Politics takes a front seat in all crises now. Their detailed response playbook was thrown out by Donald J. Trump because it was Obama's Ebola strategy guide. But the Kennedy School and the Harvard schools, their investigators, along with the professor Stephen Hillgartner of Cornell of Science and Technology, said, based on all of these guys, we failed. We failed the drill, guys. We failed the drill. Politics took a front seat. Policy took a back seat. The American people, they're still in poverty. 8 million people in poverty, guys. When the HEROES Act dropped, when enhanced unemployment fell through, all hell broke loose, guys. And now we still have an evictions moratorium that Republicans are fighting on a daily basis for the 1% that own more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. So if you're going to ask me, guys, even though I hate the Democrats, if I'm going to support, endorse, or even a deal or tolerate the Republicans. Fuck no. Hell to the fuck no. That's a divergence. That's a path of divergence, guys. These two parties have walked all the fuck over our civil rights, our liberties, our life, and our pursuit of happiness. If you think I'm going to pick a side, you don't know this guy. I'm Tommy Nation Politics. I don't pick sides. There is no sides, guys. I don't fit in with your paradigm. There's no side. There's a flag. You see that flag outside? There's three colors, red, white, and blue. Do you see any sides? No, you don't. Having the worst day, guys. Everything I try. Technical difficulties, hitting myself in the head with a pen, guys. At least I'm not Nancy Pelosi. By the way, guys, 4 Republicans in the House, like I said, are trying to impeach Joe Biden. Same thing. Same thing, same policies. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's so outraged by the abortion. She wasn't outraged by any abortion when Trump was president. Now she's outraged by abortion because now Joe Biden's president. And it's a hot button issue that they want to get elected off of. Is it working for you guys? Are you feeling touched? Did you get Gallup polled and surveyed? What'd you tell them? Oh, by the way, when Kamala Harris was telling you about how she doesn't even know how the kids in those cages could even live or survive. That's not what you do to human beings. They're called overflow facilities now, guys. So how do you feel about that? Have your principles and values changed? They haven't at Tommy Nation Politics, guys. And they never will. That's a big difference. So we're rolling out the big guns, guys, in October. October is about symbolism. It's about rebirth and prosperity. So as Joe Biden puts the nail in our life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, you could just pretty much make this pandemic part 2 of the Patriot Act. We're going to follow through with everything we were starting the Patriot Act, okay? Now there's a pandemic. You're really going to trade the rest of your liberty and freedom for security, aren't you? Aren't you afraid? Be afraid. Double mask up. Booster shot. Give me your life. Liberty, pursuit of happiness. That's what's going on, guys. It's a robbery of the American people. It's a robbery of our values and principles. A robbery of our tax dollars, which are being spent to raise a debt ceiling that these 2 thieving parties haven't paid off for 20 years. Not even paid on. Just raise the debt ceiling. Just imagine if a normal human being, if ever he maxed out his credit cards, would just raise his fucking credit limit. Would that be something that Republicans and Democrats would approve of if a normal person did that? But it's a big club, guys, and you ain't in it. If you were in the club, you could raise the debt ceiling all day long. Since you're a dirty, poor, insurrectionist, Assad apologist, Russian asset, sit back and watch these rich guys show you how it's done. Show you how real incompetence and recklessness is done. And that's the memo.
This one is not being negotiated on a bipartisan basis because obviously we're not involved in any bipartisan discussion regarding the reckless taxing and spending legislation that they are having apparently some challenges in putting together because of its comprehensive reach and because of its devastating impact on the American economy. So, the debt ceiling will be raised, as it always should be, but it will be raised by the Democrats.
Republican Minority Leader Senator Mitch McConnell continuing to vow no Republicans will vote to increase the debt limit this time. The House just sent the Senate bill that raises the debt ceiling and funds the government through December 3rd. Congress has 8 days left to pass a spending bill or risk a government shutdown. The measure, passed yesterday by Democrats in a party line vote, includes more than $28 billion in disaster relief and nearly $7 billion to support Afghan refugees. But the continuing resolution was stripped of $1 billion in funding for Israel's Iron Dome defense system after pushback from progressive.
You gotta love it, guys. The thieving and raping and looting of the American people and the working class. And all the mainstream media wants to talk about is the Israeli Iron Dome. These guys are fucking schmucks. I swear to God. They don't give two shits about you. How do you think they do? They don't. That shouldn't even be news, guys, but I'm going to report it to you as is, with no facts or bias. Fact check me on that, guys. Give me some quantifiable evidence that they do give a shit about you. Because it's been a bad day for the American worker. It's been a bad day for the black American worker, or the female American worker, or any American worker that isn't the 1% that own more wealth than the bottom 90% combined, guys. You see the current theme going on? While the Democrats play identity politics, bat around little haphazard articles of impeachment thrown in by Marjorie Taylor Greene, who should literally go back to school. She really needs to go back. We now have the continuation of Obama policies and extensions of his legacy. 2 former Obama cabinet members named to the Science and Technology Council, Penny Pritzker and Ashton Carter, designated to serve on the 30-person PCAST cabinet. So Biden's charging up his cabinet. Nancy Pelosi's raising the debt ceiling. Police brutality, those talks are dead. That was Politico 1 hour ago. The talks from Republicans and Democrats concerning police brutality is now dead. It turns out they don't give a shit about you, and also these guys protect their property, and they've always been pets and dogs to the rich. So why would they change a goddamn thing? No, they're going to focus more on abortion because that divides the nation. They're going to try to get us really unhappy with each other so that we can't see the robbing and raping that's going on with these 2 political parties. Sorry to just tell you that as is, guys. But the White House announced on Wednesday that not only have bipartisan police reform talks slimmed down to nothing, and legislation, even legislation based on the qualified immunity, guys, the immunity of the police, that would literally single-handedly get rid of their thin blue line and make honest policing possible. But these 2 thieving parties don't even want to go there. They want to raise the debt ceiling on a vote that was enormously in favor of it by both parties, even though Mitch McConnell's saying the Republicans have nothing to do with it. I mean, literally, guys. Are we really going to go back to the Republicans now that are just going to shirk their responsibilities and blame it on their Democrats? And then the Democrats are blaming it on the distinct minorities and the Republicans. Meanwhile, nobody's getting anything, guys, but Afghan refugees, I guess. The Republican administration under Trump, guys, their Secretary of State devalued the dollar by pumping trillions of dollars into it with meaningless programs, get along neoliberal policies that acquiesce, robbing us hand in hand with the Democrats, funding the military-industrial complex, Wall Street, the banks, day one. 48 hours it took them to devalue the dollar, rape our civil liberties, and fund again, for the 5th time this decade, guys, the banks and Wall Street, which make no products, create no supply or no demand. They sell. What do they sell? What exactly does Wall Street sell? They sell Wall Street. They sell stocks. They sell ideas, man. So, but those guys have hands in the donations of the campaign finance contributions and war chests to the political parties. So they're in. You guys are fucked. I don't mean to be such a Debbie Downer, guys, but it really has been it's been a banner day for these 2 parties. Not only are they excessively spending money that isn't even related to the American people, but now the midterms are really ramping up and the campaign finance war chests are getting full. The coffers are getting full. The fundraisers are going. Nancy Pelosi's got those fundraisers going, bro. And now it's time to turn us all against each other. Because if we ever realized that these 2 parties were robbing us and they were in cahoots with each other, then we would stop it. We would get up and the board game that's being played on our backs would be over. They can't have that. So here comes abortion. Here comes Anthony Blinken can't fucking literally. This guy needs help. Joe, talk to your Secretary of State. Teach him how to lie. Hillary, help him out, bro. This guy doesn't even try to lie. He just stutters. Afghanistan? Kids in cages? Overflow facilities? Meanwhile, nothing has fundamentally changed except for the excessive, reckless spending by these two parties. The 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 90%? Well, that's increased, I guess. Now there's formal complaints from the press against Joe Biden for his non-capacity of doing press conferences. They're sick of it. And he withdrew from Afghanistan, which really hurt the military-industrial complex. So they really have no patience for this dementia-riddled old man anymore. Will this finally be a time where all Americans finally see these two parties for what they are? And based on empirical data and free thinking, take that conclusion to dump them at the garbage bin where they belong. Well, that would be a lesson. But as you can see, guys, these lessons don't ever seem to be learned. But I'll keep teaching those lessons, guys, and so will Tommy Nation Politics. Make sure you join us for our live stream on Tuesday, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'm going to be doing some announcements for October. Like I said, October is the month of prosperity, of rehabilitation. We're going to look with our guest list, with our regular friends of the show. We're going to look with keen eyes on possibilities, on solutions, and on hope. And the prosperity, guys, comes from we the people. So we're the only ones that can promote the general welfare and secure blessings to ourselves and our posterity. If you keep looking for these false gods to provide you with it, they're just going to keep robbing us. And I'll keep saying that every show. You're going to get sick of it, but hopefully it can somehow combat the mainstream mass media and their propaganda narratives, their bandwagon fallacy mentality that enable these two parties to go on producing nothing but garbage. This is Tommy Nation Politics, guys.